So I just finished Tony Robbins' life coaching training course, and I am now a certified life coach. Pretty excited about this, and yeah, I'm excited to share some of what I've learned with you. I think a great place to start is this concept of the six human needs. Tony and his team break down uh, human psychology at a high level into six human needs, all of which we all must meet in one way or another. And it really helps us to understand why we do certain things, to frame things in this way. So I hope that this will be helpful for you. I'm going to break down each of the six human needs into both negative and positive manifestations of how these needs can be met. I think doing so will really highlight how certain behaviors you may not be happy with, either in yourself or with someone you know. It's probably because they're meeting a certain need in a negative way. And now the best way to resolve that issue is to help that person, whether it be ourselves or someone else, to meet that need, because it is a very much valid need, in a positive way, which often can be harder or involve more work than to meet needs in a negative way. So, the first human need is the need for certainty, which, of course, we can never have perfect certainty about anything. So, it's really more of a need for confidence, a need to feel comfortable. So this can come in many forms. Of course, material necessities fall into this category. We need to have a sense of certainty about where our next meal is coming from, about, having food and shelter. These sorts of things fit into the material aspect of certainty. But as a life coach, I'm usually focusing a bit more on the psychological and or emotional aspect. So I'm mainly going to talk about those. First, let's talk about some of the negative ways in which people can meet certainty, because I think this is one of the most common behavioral blockings that people can run into. So, a great example is if someone has a tendency to become angry. This is a way of negatively meeting their need for certainty. So, if I become angry, I'm going to suddenly feel very certain about what I'm doing and why. It's because I'm mad, right? And that puts me in a position of self-righteously telling other people how I feel and what I think needs to change, right? But for good reason, anger is often associated with a very negative connotation. So ideally, we'd be able to meet our need for certainty in some more positive way. Another example of the negative is actually sadness. So if I become sad or even like tell people that I'm feeling depressed, it can be a way to both give myself permission to focus on myself and how I feel, which is a valid thing to do at times for sure. It can also be a way to ask for help, right? If I say I'm feeling depressed, I'm just feeling bad, others might come to my aid, and that can give me a sense of safety and certainty that others are willing to help me if I feel like I really need it. But of course, nobody wants to be depressed. Nobody wants to be angry. So, how can how can any of us meet our need for certainty in a positive way? I think this is actually already one of the most interesting and kind of tricky aspects of the six human needs. Meeting any need in a positive way can be complicated and challenging, but meeting even the very first need of certainty in a way that's positive on the emotional front can be very challenging. And I think really the only way to do it is to cultivate a sense of inner well being and inner peace. And that's something a lot of people struggle with, right? So if you see someone who has a tendency to become angry or sad or depressed, it's probably because on some level they're struggling to maintain and cultivate a sense of inner peace. and understandably so. It's very hard to do so, and there's a lot of mainstream narratives going around, for example, that are actively trying to whip people up into being fearful, right? To feeling that fear. Um, and that's often not serving us. So it's very important to cultivate that sense of inner peace. But how can we do that? Well, on one one way or another, you pretty much have to cultivate a sense of faith, right? Like it involves optimism. It involves maybe, you know, awe, feeling inspired, all these sorts of things. And another key aspect of it is focusing on the future that you're trying to work toward rather than only seeing all the negative things that are happening moment to moment. Getting caught up in those, it's going to feel like, you know, the ground is being washed away from under you. But if you can focus on a future vision and you can have a deep sense of faith and optimism that what you're doing ultimately is moving in that direction, I think then we can cultivate that sense of inner peace and avoid tendencies towards anger or depression. Okay, so now let's talk about the second of the six human needs. And this one is variety, or paradoxically, you could call it uncertainty, right? So the first need is certainty, second need is uncertainty. Seems like kind of a conflict, right? But I think it's quite intuitive that we all want some variety in our life. Yeah, we all want a sense of adventure. We all want to learn new things. We all want to have new experiences. And we all do need a sense of variety because what is living if you're not learning, if you're not exploring, right? So, like all of the six human needs, this need can be met in negative ways or positive ways. It's very important to understand the negative ways in which each need can be met so that we can identify what problematic behavior might be associated with that, right? So, what are some examples of meeting the need for variety in a negative way? I think one of the main ones that affects a lot of people in my life is infidelity, right? Cheating, or really, you know, lying for any reason, but cheating specifically is motivated by a desire for sexual variety, one that I would say is very unhealthy and can destroy relationships. It can rip families apart. And, all of these things can be explained by this person not having their need for variety met in a healthy way, right? Another example of a negative need for variety, one that I am personally prone to, would be recklessness. I have a tendency to do sports like climbing and mountain biking that can be very dangerous. And I've been known in the past to take silly, unnecessary risks, something I don't do as much now, but that's a thing. Uh, So, what are some positive ways that we can meet our need for variety such that we don't fall into any of these more negative tendencies? So, as I mentioned, learning for sure. That's incredibly important to me. Have to always feel like I'm learning something new. Having new experiences that can involve meeting new people and doing so in a way that doesn't involve infidelity, right? Like you can connect with people on a very deep level, be it intellectually, emotionally, whatever it is, without crossing those certain lines, assuming that you do respect such lines and want to be in a committed partnership. Um, so also just adventure in general. I mean, climbing is great, biking is great. I still love to do these things, and I think I just, tend to do them in a more safe and responsible sort of way these days, and that's all great. So I think it's really important to recognize that we all have a need for variety. If we have a tendency to be bored, maybe it's in our job, maybe it's in our relationship or something, that means we need to invite more things into our life. And it can be hard to do that if you feel like you're already working so hard just to like pay the bills or whatever. But on some level, you do need that variety. So you need to find a way to get it, whether it's just reading a book, whatever works for you. So now let's talk about the third of the six human needs, and this is the need for love and connection. I think we all understand intuitively that we need love and connection in our life. However, it's easy enough to forget how important this is, especially in this technological age of social media and AI. There's all these kind of narratives being thrown around that who needs humans? You can just live in your virtual world or just live on social media and that's like just as good or whatever. Like it's easy to fall into these trappings, but on a very human level, it's incredibly important that we have deep connection and love in our life. And if we don't have that in a healthy way, we're going to tend to fill that need in a negative way. So, what are some of the negative ways in which a need for love and connection could be filled? Interestingly, this overlaps with what we discussed a bit about earlier with the need for certainty. A tendency towards depression can actually be fulfilling a need for connection to oneself. So if I am depressed, suddenly I'm giving myself the permission to just sit with myself, feel myself, connect with myself. And those are all very valuable and useful things to do. Now, it's not ideal to have to become depressed to give yourself permission to do that, but, it works in a pinch, right? Similarly, if I become depressed or if I say I feel sad, that may result in somebody coming to my aid, somebody trying to help me in some way, and that can help me to feel connected to them. However, if that's the main mode by which you're getting connection and love in your life, then you're really not living life to the fullest because the most positive and beautiful forms of love and connection are much more positive than that, right? So, going to the positive forms in which these sorts of things can manifest, um, it again connects back to the need for certainty in some ways, where that future vision that you're working towards is so important to really feel love with somebody, right? You really need to have a communal sense of bonding, a sense that you're going to be together in some longer time frame, even if it's unclear how that is, a sense that you truly want what's best for each other, right? These sorts of things are the basis on which powerful and healthy love and connection are built. And, you know, really, you need to make time to connect with people when you're feeling good, or you're going to find yourself ultimately feeling bad because you don't have that connection and love that you need. And then you're going to desperately, try to get some love and connection wherever you can find it. And that's really not going to serve you in the long run. So now let's talk about the fourth of the six human needs, and this is the need for significance. This need is the culprit behind a lot of probably the most disagreeable behaviors that you've experienced in your life, whether that is in yourself or in others. I think it's readily obvious how the need for significance can manifest in negative forms. But to be very explicit, the easiest way to get an immediate sense of significance is through violence. If I threaten somebody, I am going to immediately feel significant to them, right? They are going to immediately feel like I am significant to them because I'm a threat. And so if we don't meet the need for significance in a positive way, this can lead to violent behavior, whether that's just verbal violence or ultimately physical violence. So it's very important to understand the need for significance and how it might be affecting you and the people around you. So how can we get a sense of significance in a positive light? Well, through love and connection, that's a perfectly viable way to get a sense of significance just from the people around you. You might be significant to any of your family members, friends, for any number of reasons. Cultivate those positive things and cultivate that sense of significance. It's very important. Another clear opportunity to get a sense of significance is through your career. A lot of people get a sense of being important because of how they're contributing to society. That's very valuable, a very healthy thing to do. People who don't have that will tend to become depressed to the point where they may even become violent out of frustration. Now, I'll point out that if you're dealing with somebody in your life who has a tendency towards violence, on some level, it probably is because they feel insignificant. They may feel really insecure. They may be a straight up narcissist, which ultimately is just being insecure. These things are really important to recognize, but I should warn you, if you confront that directly, they're going to feel attacked. The need for significance is insecurity, and it can feel very much like someone's attacking me if I'm feeling insecure about something and they call me out on it, right? So the best way to address a situation where somebody is lacking a sense of significance is to, first of all, establish that you want to be helpful to them. They have to accept that and kind of ask you for help on some level, and then help them get what they want and address the significance in a roundabout way. You don't want to directly say, hey, you're doing this because you feel insignificant. That's going to be insulting. That's going to be an attack. That's going to make them feel really insignificant, and they are going to fight back and potentially become violent. Please don't do that. So far, we've talked about the first 4 of the 6 human needs, and these are all survival needs. We absolutely need to fulfill each of these 4 needs for our survival. The last 2 needs are still very important. They still are very much needs, but they're more spiritual needs. These needs have to be filled for us to feel fulfilled, happy, and healthy in the long run. So the 5th need is the need for growth. We don't have to be growing at every moment all the time to survive, obviously, but on some level, we do need to grow to feel alive. This can be connected to the need for variety. We need to feel like we're experiencing new things, growing, learning all the time. And I think it's pretty intuitive why this is a need and how it can manifest in positive ways, but it's worth highlighting how it can manifest in negative ways as well. If someone feels frustrated, like, they're not being offered the learning opportunities and the growing opportunities they really want, they could be tempted towards a negative form of growth. It could be getting involved with some sort of tribalistic community, right? It could be getting involved with a gang or something as a way to grow in some sort of a social circle. If people are desperate enough, that sort of growth might be all they feel like they really have available to them. So it's very important to meet this need, just like any other, in a positive way. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself reaching for things in a negative way to fulfill that need. The last of the 6 human needs is the need for contribution. To really feel fulfilled, we have to have a sense that we are contributing to others and to society. Again, it's easy to forget how important that connection to other human beings is at times. And people get lost feeling unfulfilled, feeling frustrated, feeling bored, feeling depressed, not realizing that ultimately it's because they're not contributing enough, right? It's easy to think, oh, I'm not getting enough, and that's why I feel sad. But actually, you'll never really feel truly happy, truly fulfilled, truly at peace, unless you know how you are contributing to others. So, if we don't find a positive way to contribute, much like our need for growth, we might find a more negative way. We might end up contributing to a cause that is really not so great. just to get that sense that we're contributing to something. We're doing something that matters in some way, even if ultimately it's negative. So it is very important to find positive ways in which we can all contribute to our community, to society, whatever it is. Otherwise, we'll have a tendency to, even if it's subconsciously, contribute to something more negative. If you found this discussion of the six human needs to be interesting, to resonate with you in your life on a personal level, or to reveal something about someone in your life potentially, then I encourage you to use this framing to look a bit deeper. How are you fulfilling each of these six human needs? Because in one way or another, you are. Most of them you need to be for survival. If you analyze your own behavior or someone's behavior through this lens, it's likely to reveal a lot about yourself and potentially open up doors for growth and improving and even making potentially a spiritual breakthrough that gets you to where you really want to be. Another thing that I'll note here is most people strongly identify with two of the six human needs at any given stage in their life. So when you're younger, that might be primarily the need for significance and certainty, right? It's like you're trying to find your way in the world, you're trying to make a mark, you're trying to get that recognition, right? But then as you grow, as you mature, as you gain some wisdom, you might find that ultimately you end up in a place where growth and contribution are the most important things. You don't feel like you need so much certainty or significance because you're more or less comfortable, you know how to weather the storm, these sorts of things. So I would encourage you to ask, what are the two human needs that seem most important to you? Those are the ones you're probably going to want to focus on. Thanks for listening.